The July sun beat down mercilessly on the asphalt parking lot of Riverside Auto Repair in Portland, Oregon. Heat waves shimmered above the cracked pavement, and the air hung thick with the scent of motor oil and tire rubber. Marcus Wellington stepped out of his sleek silver Mercedes-Benz S-Class, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the ground as he surveyed the modest repair shop with barely concealed disdain. The building itself seemed to sag under the weight of decades, faded paint, peeled from wooden window frames, and a hand-painted sign reading, "Honest work, fair prices," swung lazily in the hot breeze. To Marcus, a senior investment banker at Portland's most prestigious firm, this place represented everything he had worked his entire life to escape: poverty, struggle, and the stench of manual labor. He checked his Rolex. 2:47 p.m. He was already late for a conference call with clients in Tokyo, and this detour was eating into his meticulously planned schedule. His regular dealership was booked solid for 2 weeks, and when his car had begun making an unsettling grinding noise that morning, his assistant had found this place as the only shop with an immediate opening. Marcus pushed through the glass door, which announced his entrance with a tired jingle. The waiting area was small and dated. Orange plastic chairs from the 1970s lined one wall, and outdated magazines sat on a coffee table scarred with cup rings. An oscillating fan pushed warm air around the room, doing little to combat the oppressive heat. Behind the counter stood a woman in her late 20s, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, grease stains visible on her worn work pants and faded blue mechanic's shirt. She looked up from a computer screen, her brown eyes meeting his with a professional but guarded expression. "Good afternoon. Welcome to Riverside Auto Repair. I'm Elena Rodriguez. How can I help you today?" Her voice was steady, with just a hint of a Portland accent. Marcus barely glanced at her as he pulled out his phone, already typing a response to an email. "My car is making a noise. I need it fixed immediately. I have appointments this afternoon." Elena grabbed a clipboard and a pen. "Okay, let me get some information. What kind of noise are we talking about? Can you describe when it happens?" "I don't know. It's a grinding sound. Isn't that your job to figure out?" Marcus's tone was sharp with impatience. He finally looked up from his phone, his eyes sweeping over her appearance with obvious judgment. "Look, I don't have time for a lengthy diagnostic. Just fix whatever's making the noise and do it quickly. I need to be back on the road in an hour." Elena's jaw tightened slightly, but she maintained her professional composure. She had dealt with difficult customers before. This wasn't her first encounter with someone who looked at her and saw only a woman in a male-dominated field, or worse, someone beneath their social status. "Sir, I understand you're in a hurry, but vehicle safety requires proper inspection. An hour might not be—" "An hour," Marcus interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "I'm not paying for you to waste my time. This is a Mercedes-Benz S-Class, probably worth more than this entire shop. Surely even you can handle a simple repair." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and cutting. Elena felt the familiar sting of condescension, the assumption that because she worked with her hands, because her clothes carried oil stains, because she couldn't afford the luxury car he drove, she must be less intelligent, less capable, less deserving of basic respect. She took a slow breath, counting to 5 silently. Her father's voice echoed in her mind from years ago. "Mija, when people try to make you feel small, remember, their words say everything about them and nothing about you. Do your work with pride." "Mr. Eleanor paused, pen poised over the clipboard. "Wellington, Marcus Wellington," he said, it as if the name should mean something to her. "Mr. Wellington, I appreciate that you're in a hurry. However, I have a responsibility to ensure any vehicle that leaves this shop is safe to drive. If there's a grinding noise, it could indicate a serious issue with your brake system, transmission, or wheel bearings. Any of these could be dangerous if not properly addressed." Marcus waved his hand dismissively. Fine, just do whatever." Here are the keys." He dropped them on the counter with a clatter, not bothering to hand them to her directly. Elena picked up the keys and maintained her professional tone, though something hardened in her eyes. "I'll need you to fill out this work order with your contact information and sign at the bottom. Our liability insurance requires it." As Marcus scrawled his information impatiently, barely reading the form, Eleanor walked toward the bay door. "I'll pull your car around back and get started. Feel free to wait in here. There's coffee by the window, though I can't promise it's up to your standards." The slight edge in her voice wasn't lost on Marcus, but he was already back on his phone, pacing the small waiting area as he barked instructions to someone on the other end about stock portfolios and quarterly earnings. Elena stepped out into the blazing afternoon sun and approached the Mercedes. Even in her frustration, she had to admire the vehicle. It was immaculate, the silver paint gleaming despite the Portland dust. She slid into the driver's seat, noting the luxury leather interior, the advanced dashboard display, the subtle scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. For just a moment, she allowed herself to wonder what it would be like to live Marcus Wellington's life. To drive a car like this, to wear suits that cost more than her monthly rent, to move through the world with that kind of confidence and entitlement. Then she shook her head and started the engine. That wasn't her life, and honestly, after meeting Marcus Wellington, she wasn't sure she'd want it if it meant becoming someone who treated other people like they were invisible. Eleanor carefully backed the Mercedes into Bay 3 of the shop. The hydraulic lift groaned as she positioned the vehicle and began raising it, the mechanical arms lifting the expensive sedan off the ground with practiced precision. She grabbed her rolling stool and slid underneath, her trained eyes immediately beginning their systematic inspection. The grinding noise Marcus had described could stem from multiple sources, and Elena wasn't about to cut corners just because some arrogant businessman wanted a quick fix. She checked the brake pads first. Plenty of material left, no scoring on the rotors. The wheel bearings seemed tight, no excessive play when she tested them. Then she moved to the suspension components, testing each connection point, looking for wear or damage. The struts were in good condition. Control arm bushings showed minimal wear, consistent with the vehicle's mileage. Eleanor was about to move on to the transmission when something caught her eye. A slight irregularity in one of the brake lines running along the undercarriage. She rolled closer, pulling her inspection light in for a better look. Her breath caught. There, where the steel brake line curved around the frame rail, she could see it. A thin crack in the metal, nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look and had the right angle of light. Around the crack, she could see the telltale signs of corrosion, likely from years of exposure to road salt during Portland's occasional winter storms. Eleanor's heart rate quickened as the implications sank in. This wasn't just a simple repair issue. This was a catastrophic failure waiting to happen. The brake line was under constant pressure when the brakes were applied. That crack meant the line was compromised, weakened. It could hold for days, weeks, or it could rupture in the next 5 minutes. If that line failed while Marcus was driving, especially at highway speeds, he would lose braking pressure. Depending on which line failed and how catastrophically, he could lose brakes to 2 wheels or potentially experience total brake failure. On Interstate 5 during rush hour traffic, that would be a death sentence, not just for Marcus, but potentially for anyone else on the road with him. Elena rolled out from under the Mercedes and stood up, wiping her hands on her work pants. She looked back at the waiting room, through the bay window, where she could see Marcus still pacing, still on his phone, completely unaware of how close he was to a tragedy. Every instinct in her mechanic's brain screamed that this repair would take time, probably 3 to 4 hours once she ordered the part, maybe longer depending on availability. The entire brake line would need to be replaced, not patched. The system would need to be bled, tested, and retested to ensure it was safe. Marcus Wellington had made it crystal clear He didn't have that kind of time, and he'd made it equally clear what he thought of her and her capabilities. For just a moment, and Elena would be ashamed of this thought later, she wondered what would happen if she simply told him about the noise, claimed it was a loose heat shield or something minor, and sent him on his way. He'd made his contempt for her obvious. He'd treated her like she was beneath him, like her expertise and her concerns didn't matter. Would anyone really blame her for taking him at his word and doing the quick fix he'd demanded? But even as the thought formed, Elena knew she couldn't do it. Her father hadn't raised her that way. Roberto Rodriguez had taught her that the measure of a person wasn't how they treated those who could benefit them, but how they treated those who couldn't. And more than that, he'd taught her that pride in your work meant doing it right, every single time, regardless of whether the customer appreciated it or not. "Damn it," Elena muttered to herself, pulling off her work gloves. She grabbed her phone and quickly searched for brake line suppliers in the Portland area. She needed to confirm parts availability before she broke the news to Mr. Marcus Wellington that his car wouldn't be ready in an hour. As she made the calls, she could hear his voice drifting from the waiting room, loud and self-important, discussing financial projections and corporate mergers as if the whole world revolved around his business deals. Elena secured a brake line from a supplier across town. They could have it delivered in 90 minutes. With installation and testing, she was looking at a minimum 4-hour repair, probably closer to 5 to do it properly. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation she knew was coming, and walked back toward the waiting room. Marcus was in the middle of a heated phone conversation when Eleanor approached. She stood quietly for a moment, not wanting to interrupt, but as the conversation stretched on, something about someone's incompetence costing the firm a potential client, she cleared her throat gently. Marcus held up one finger without looking at her, a gesture that said, "Wait," but felt more like, "You're not important enough to interrupt this." Eleanor waited, counting to 10 this time, then 20, then 30. Finally, after nearly 2 full minutes of standing there like a servant waiting for acknowledgement, her patience snapped. "Mr. Wellington, I need to speak with you about your vehicle. It's important." Marcus shot her an irritated glance and turned away, still talking. "No, tell them we're not accepting anything below 12.5%. I don't care about their projections." "Mr. Wellington," Eleanor's voice was firmer now, with an edge that cut through his conversation. "Your life is at stake. I need you to listen to me right now." That got his attention. Marcus's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed with annoyance. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, ending the call. He turned to face Elena fully, his expression a mixture of irritation and condescension. "What are you talking about? I thought you were supposed to be fixing my car, not being dramatic." Elena bit back her initial response and forced herself to remain calm and professional. "Mr. Wellington, I've completed my initial inspection of your vehicle. The grinding noise you heard is likely from your transmission mount, which is a minor issue. However, I discovered something much more serious." She pulled out her phone and showed him a photo she'd taken of the cracked brake line. "This is one of your brake lines. You see this crack here? The line is corroded and compromised. This isn't something that can be patched or temporarily fixed. The entire line needs to be replaced immediately. If this line fails while you're driving, you could lose braking power, potentially causing a serious accident." Marcus glanced at the photo with barely concealed skepticism. "It's a tiny crack. You're probably exaggerating to run up the bill. How much is this going to cost?" Eleanor felt her jaw clench but maintained her composure. "The part itself is about $300, and labor will be around 4 to 5 hours. We're looking at approximately $800 to $900 total. But Mr. Wellington, the cost isn't the point." $800. Marcus's voice rose sharply. "For a crack I can barely see in that photo. This is exactly what I expected from a place like this. You people always try to upsell unnecessary repairs to customers who don't know any better." The words struck Elena like physical blows. "You people." as if she were part of some conspiracy of dishonest mechanics preying on innocent customers, as if her years of training, her certifications, her genuine concern for his safety meant nothing. Mr. Wellington, I'm not trying to upsell you anything. I'm telling you that your vehicle has a critical safety issue that needs to be addressed. Before you drive it again, I can show you the crack in person if you'd like. I can explain exactly why this is dangerous. No, what you can do is fix the noise I came in for and let me be on my way, Marcus interrupted, his voice dripping with condescension. I don't have time for this, and I'm certainly not paying $900 based on the word of... He paused, his eyes sweeping over her appearance again. Someone working in a shop like this. The implications of his words hung heavy in the air. Elena could fill in the blanks he'd left unspoken. Someone like you, someone who probably couldn't even afford to eat at the restaurants I frequent, someone who doesn't have a college degree, someone who isn't worth trusting. Elena took a step back, her hands clenched at her sides. She thought of her father, who had immigrated from Mexico with nothing, who had worked 2 jobs to put food on the table while teaching her everything he knew about engines and integrity. She thought of the night classes she'd taken, the certifications she'd earned, the countless hours she'd spent proving herself in a field that constantly questioned whether a woman belonged under the hood of a car. "Sir," she said, her voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface, "I understand you're skeptical, I understand you're in a hurry, but I cannot, in good conscience, let you drive that vehicle knowing what I know. If you don't want me to do the repair, that's your choice, but I need you to sign a waiver acknowledging that I informed you of the safety issue and that you declined the recommended repair." Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. A sharp, dismissive sound that echoed in the small waiting room. "A waiver? You're serious? You know what? Fine. Give me whatever paper you want me to sign. I'm taking my car and going somewhere reputable for a second opinion. Mr. Wellington, please." "I said I'm done here." His voice was cold now, final. "Get my car down off whatever lift you have it on. I'm leaving." Elena stood frozen for a moment, torn between her professional responsibility and the reality of the situation. She couldn't physically force him to accept the repair. She couldn't hold his car hostage. All she could do was document what she'd found, get his signature acknowledging he'd been informed, and hope, pray, that he would make it to wherever he was going without the brake line failing. "I'll get the paperwork," she said quietly, turning toward the counter. As she printed out the waiver and filled in the details of her findings, Elena felt a deep sense of unease settle in her chest. This was exactly why she'd gotten into this business, to prevent accidents, to keep people safe, to use her skills to make a difference. And now this arrogant man was about to drive away in a vehicle that could fail catastrophically, and there was nothing more she could do to stop him. She handed Marcus the waiver, watching as he barely glanced at it before, scrawling his signature across the bottom, the same careless signature he'd given on the initial work order. "Your keys will be in the vehicle," Elena said, her voice flat. "Give me 5 minutes to lower it and bring it around front." Marcus was already back on his phone as she walked away. Elena returned to Bay 3, her footsteps heavy. She lowered the Mercedes carefully, then sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine. The luxury surroundings felt hollow now, tainted by the knowledge of what was lurking underneath, invisible but deadly. As she drove the car around to the front of the shop, Eleanor made a decision. She might not be able to force Marcus Wellington to fix his car, but she could at least call his dealership and inform them of the issue. She could document everything meticulously, take more photos, create a paper trail that might help if, when, something went wrong. Marcus was waiting impatiently at the front door. The moment Elena stepped out of the Mercedes, he brushed past her and got in without a word of thanks, without any acknowledgement of her concerns. "Mr. Wellington," Elena called out as he put the car in drive, "please, at least drive carefully. Avoid heavy braking if you can, and..." But he was already pulling away, leaving her standing in the parking lot with the July sun beating down on her shoulders, watching as the silver Mercedes disappeared down the street, a ticking time bomb on wheels, carrying an arrogant man who thought he knew better than everyone else. Elena walked back inside, pulled out her incident report forms, and began documenting everything that had happened in meticulous detail. Her hands were shaking slightly as she wrote, not from fear of liability, she had his signed waiver, but from the awful knowledge that she might have just witnessed the last hour of Marcus Wellington's life and been powerless to prevent what might come next. Outside, the sun continued its slow arc across the sky, and somewhere in Portland's afternoon traffic, a silver Mercedes with a cracked brake line merged onto the highway, its driver completely unaware of how thin the line was between his current moment of victory over a poor mechanic and potential disaster. Marcus Wellington merged his Mercedes onto Interstate 5, heading north with a sense of vindication. The late afternoon sun glinted off the Columbia River to his right as he accelerated smoothly into the flow of traffic. See? The car was driving perfectly fine. That mechanic had been exactly what he'd expected. Another person trying to take advantage of someone successful, trying to drum up unnecessary work. He pressed the brake pedal gently as traffic slowed ahead, and the Mercedes responded smoothly. Nothing wrong there. The grinding noise he'd heard that morning seemed to have disappeared, probably just something minor that had resolved itself, or maybe dirt in the brake pads that had worked itself out. Marcus allowed himself a satisfied smile as he switched lanes, his phone connecting to the car's Bluetooth system. He had won this small battle, refusing to be scammed by some grease-stained mechanic in a rundown shop. He imagined telling the story at the office tomorrow, how he'd outsmarted an attempted upsell, how he'd seen right through the tactic. Call Davidson, he instructed the car's voice system. A moment later, his colleague picked up. Marcus, hey, how'd the car thing go? Don't even get me started, Marcus said, a note of amusement in his voice. Went to some hole-in-the-wall repair shop because they could see me immediately. The mechanic tried to sell me on an $800 brake line replacement, claimed there was a critical crack that would cause my brakes to fail. He laughed. I'm driving on the highway right now and everything's fine. Just another mechanic trying to fleece someone they think doesn't know any better. Davidson chuckled on the other end. Classic. They see the expensive car and think easy, Mark. Exactly, Marcus agreed, feeling validated. Anyway, I'm heading back to the office now. Did the Tokyo clients... He was cut off by the sudden blare of a horn. A minivan had drifted into his lane without signaling. Marcus reacted instinctively, pressing the brake pedal firmly to drop back and create space. The pedal felt different, softer somehow, with a tiny bit more travel than usual. But the car slowed normally, and the minivan moved back to its lane. Marcus frowned, slightly, but dismissed the thought. Probably just his imagination, his mind playing tricks after that mechanic's warnings. Sorry, some idiot driver, Marcus said, refocusing on the conversation. You were saying about the Tokyo deal? They talked business for another 10 minutes as Marcus navigated through the moderate afternoon traffic. The highway was busy but moving well. Summer in Portland brought tourists and increased traffic, but it was manageable. The sun was warm through the windshield, and the air conditioning kept the interior perfectly comfortable. Marcus was explaining a complex financial restructuring to Davidson when he needed to brake again, this time more firmly as a truck merged slowly into traffic ahead. He pressed the pedal, and again, that slightly soft feeling, a moment where the brake didn't seem to bite quite as firmly as usual. Hold on, Davidson, Marcus interrupted himself, his brow furrowing. He pressed the brake pedal again experimentally, and there it was, definitely softer than it should be, the pedal traveling further toward the floor before the brakes engaged. Everything okay? Davidson asked. Marcus felt the first flutter of unease in his chest. Yeah, I think so. My brakes feel a little weird. I'm sure it's fine. But as he said the words, doubt crept in. That mechanic, Elena, He suddenly remembered her name. She had shown him that photo. He'd barely looked at it, dismissing it as an exaggeration. But what if... No, he was being paranoid. The car was driving fine. He was almost to the office. "Marcus, you still there?" Davidson's voice came through the speakers. "Yeah, I'm here. Listen, I should focus on driving. I'll call you when I get to the office." Marcus ended the call, his hands gripping the steering wheel a little tighter now. Traffic was getting heavier as he approached the downtown exits. The highway stretched ahead, 6 lanes of vehicles moving at varying speeds, some racing past in the left lane, others crawling along in the right. He pressed the brake pedal again, testing it. It still worked, but there was no denying that soft, spongy feeling now. It was getting worse, he realized. The pedal was traveling further each time he pressed it, and the braking response was becoming less immediate. Marcus felt sweat beginning to form on his forehead, despite the air conditioning. He switched on the radio, trying to distract himself from the growing anxiety, but turned it off almost immediately. He needed to focus. "It's fine," he said aloud to himself. "Just a few more miles. The brakes are working." But they weren't working normally, and deep down, Marcus knew it. That crack Elena had shown him, it was real. And something was happening underneath his expensive car, something invisible but dangerous, just as she had warned. Pride warred with practicality in Marcus's mind. He didn't want to admit she'd been right. He didn't want to pull over and call for a tow truck, didn't want to face the humiliation of having ignored a legitimate safety warning. The downtown exit was coming up in just 2 miles. Surely he could make it that far. His office had a parking garage. He could make it there, park the car, and deal with this quietly without anyone knowing about his mistake. Marcus moved into the right lane, preparing for his exit. A BMW cut in front of him without warning, and he had to brake. This time, when his foot pressed the pedal, it went almost to the floor before the brakes. Engaged, the Mercedes slowed, but not quickly enough. Marcus had to swerve slightly to avoid rear-ending the BMW, his heart hammering in his chest. Okay, he muttered, his voice shaking now. "This is not fine. This is definitely not fine." He activated his hazard lights and began trying to merge right toward the shoulder, but the afternoon traffic was relentless. Cars packed the lanes, moving at 50 miles per hour, and no one was letting him over. He signaled, tried to ease right, but vehicle after vehicle flowed past, blocking his path to safety. Marcus's phone rang through the car speakers, making him jump. The caller ID showed Riverside Auto Repair. Elena, that mechanic, calling him. For a moment his pride almost made him ignore it, but fear overrode his ego, and he answered. "Mr. Wellington?" Elena's voice came through, professional but with an undercurrent of genuine concern. "This is Elena Rodriguez from Riverside Auto Repair. I know you didn't want to hear from me, but I've been thinking about your car since you left. I need to know, are you somewhere safe? Have you noticed any changes in your brake performance?" Marcus wanted to lie, wanted to tell her everything was fine, that he'd been right to ignore her warning. But the words that came out were different, colored by genuine fear. "The pedal, it's going to the floor. The brakes still work, but barely. I can't pull over. Traffic won't let me merge right." Okay, listen to me carefully." Elena's voice shifted, becoming calm but urgent. The voice of someone who knew exactly what was happening and what needed to be done. "You need to stay calm. Where are you right now?" "Interstate 5, northbound. Approaching the downtown exits. I'm in the middle lane." "All right, do not slam on your brakes. You still have some braking power, but if you demand too much from the system, the line could fail completely. You need to gradually reduce your speed using engine braking. What gear are you in?" Marcus glanced at the dashboard through his mounting panic. "Drive, automatic." "Okay, you should have a manual mode. Look for paddle shifters on your steering wheel or a gear selector position marked with plus and minus signs. Can you find it?" Marcus's hands were trembling as he searched. There, paddle shifters behind the steering wheel. Yes, I found them. Good. I need you to downshift one gear. Pull the left paddle. This will use the engine to help slow you down. Don't brake yet, just let the engine slow the car. Marcus pulled the left paddle. The transmission shifted down, and immediately he felt the car begin to decelerate. The change was gradual but noticeable. The engine RPMs increased, creating resistance. "It's working," Marcus said, his voice tight with stress. "I'm slowing down." "Good. Keep using the engine to slow down. If you absolutely need to brake, do it gently. Don't push the pedal more than halfway. The crack in your brake line is getting worse, and the system is losing pressure. You're essentially driving on borrowed time." Marcus felt tears of fear and regret prickling his eyes. "I should have listened to you. I'm sorry. We can talk about that later," Eleanor interrupted, her voice firm but not unkind. "Right now, we focus on getting you safe. Can you see an exit coming up?" "Yes. The Morrison Bridge exit is about a mile ahead." "Perfect. That's a good exit. It has a long off-ramp, but I need you to prepare mentally. Getting off the highway is going to be tricky. You're going to need to merge right across 2 lanes of traffic. Can you do that?" Marcus looked at the wall of vehicles to his right, moving at speed, packed close together. The thought of trying to merge through them with failing brakes made his stomach twist with terror. "I don't know if I can. They're not giving me space." "You're going to have to make space," Elena said, her voice steady. "Turn on your hazard lights if they're not already on. Start signaling right. Most importantly, I need you to lay on your horn. Constant. Loud. People will move when they realize something's wrong." Marcus had never felt so vulnerable, so helpless in his entire life. All his wealth, all his success, all his confidence meant nothing on this highway with brakes that were failing beneath him. He thought of Elena standing in that repair shop, trying to warn him, trying to save his life, while he'd looked at her with contempt and dismissed her expertise. "Okay," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll try." "Not try, do. Marcus." She used his first name now, and somehow that made everything more real. "You can do this. I'm right here with you, okay? I'm not hanging up. We're going to get you off this highway safely." Marcus pressed down on the horn. The loud, sustained blast cut through the traffic noise. He signaled right and began easing the Mercedes toward the next lane, still honking, still using engine braking to manage his speed. The response wasn't immediate, but gradually he saw brake lights ahead in the right lane. A Honda Civic slowed slightly, creating a gap. Marcus seized it, steering into the space. 1 lane to go. "I'm in the right lane," he reported, his voice shaking. "Excellent. 1 more lane to the exit. Keep that horn going. How are your brakes feeling?" Marcus tested them gently. The pedal went almost completely to the floor now, offering minimal resistance. "Bad. Really bad. The pedal is basically gone." "Don't panic, you still have engine braking. Downshift 1 more gear if you can. Make yourself loud and visible. That exit is coming up fast. You need to be on that shoulder in the next 1/4 mile." Marcus downshifted again. The engine whined in protest, but the car slowed more. He held the horn down continuously now, a desperate, sustained plea for space. A delivery truck in the rightmost lane started to speed up, as if offended by the noise, but then seemed to register the hazard lights and the erratic movement of the Mercedes. The truck slowed, dropping back. Marcus took the opening, merging into the exit lane with what felt like inches to spare. The off-ramp began its curve, sloping downward slightly. His speed was still too high, 40 miles per hour on a ramp designed for 25. "I'm on the exit ramp," Marcus said, his voice cracking, "but I'm going too fast. There's a curve ahead." "I know that exit," Elena said quickly. "The curve isn't too sharp. Stay calm. Use all of the lane. Take the curve wide. To reduce how sharp it is. If you need to brake at all, do it before the curve, not during. Light pressure only." Marcus followed her instructions, his entire body rigid with tension. He touched the brake pedal. Barely any pressure, more of a suggestion than actual braking force, and felt almost no response. The curve approached rapidly. He took it wide, using both lanes of the exit ramp, praying no one was entering from the opposite direction. The Mercedes's tires squealed slightly as he navigated the turn. His speed dropped to 35, then 30, as the upward slope at the end of the ramp helped slow him. The light at the bottom of the ramp was red, and cars were stopped. "There's a red light at the bottom with stopped traffic," Marcus said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I don't think I can stop in time. Is there a shoulder or any space to the right?" Marcus looked. There was a narrow shoulder, and beyond that, an empty parking lot for a closed business. "There's a parking lot to the right. It's empty. Take it. Forget the traffic laws right now. Get into that lot. Use your parking brake if you need to, but pull it up gradually. If you yank it, you could spin out." Marcus cranked the wheel right, bumping over the curb onto the shoulder. The cars at the red light honked at him, drivers yelling, but he barely registered it. He guided the Mercedes into the empty parking lot, the car still moving at 20 miles per hour. "I'm in the lot, still moving. Her brakes are completely gone. The pedal is on the floor. Parking brake, gradual pull, and turn the wheel if you need to. Scrub speed by making gentle curves. You've got space now." Marcus pulled the parking brake lever slowly, feeling the rear brakes engage. The car shuddered and slowed. He steered in a gentle S pattern across the empty lot, using every technique Elena had guided him through. 15 miles per hour. 10. 5. Finally, blessedly, the Mercedes rolled to a stop. Marcus sat frozen, his hands still gripping the steering wheel in a death grip, his entire body trembling. He realized he was crying, tears of fear, relief and shame streaming down his face. "I stopped," he managed to say. "I'm stopped. I'm okay." "Thank God," Elena breathed out, and Marcus could hear the genuine relief in her voice. "You did great, Marcus. You handled that perfectly. Are you injured at all?" "No, I'm fine. Just scared. Really, really scared." He wiped at his eyes with shaking hands. "Elena, you saved my life. After how I treated you, after everything I said, you still saved my life." "That's my job," Elena said simply. "And it's the right thing to do. Listen, you need to stay with your car. Don't try to drive it anywhere. I'm going to call a tow truck to come get you and bring your car back to my shop. This time, we're going to fix it properly, okay?" Marcus nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "Okay, whatever you say. And Elena, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. You were trying to help me, and I was too arrogant, too." He struggled to find the words. "Too caught up in my own importance to listen." There was a pause on the line. When Elena spoke again, her voice was softer. "Apology accepted. We'll talk more when you get back here. The tow truck should be there in about 30 minutes. Will you be all right until then?" "Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much." After they hung up, Marcus sat in his motionless Mercedes in the empty parking lot. Afternoon sun streaming through the windshield, and tried to process what had just happened. He'd come within minutes, maybe seconds, of a catastrophic brake failure on a crowded highway. If that line had failed completely while he was in heavy traffic, he could have killed himself. He could have killed others, families, children, people just trying to get home from work. And the only reason he was sitting here safely was because the woman he'd dismissed and insulted had cared enough about a stranger's safety to call him, to guide him, to save his life, despite having every reason to let him face the consequences of his arrogance. Marcus pulled out his phone and looked at his reflection in the dark screen. The successful investment banker stared back at him, but for the first time in years, he didn't like what he saw. He saw someone who had become so focused on status and success that he'd forgotten basic human decency. He saw someone who judged people by their job titles and bank accounts rather than their character and expertise. He thought about Elena standing in her repair shop in grease-stained work clothes, trying to tell him about a problem she'd discovered. trying to keep him safe, and being treated like she was trying to scam him. The memory made him sick with shame. A text notification appeared on his screen, a message from his assistant about the Tokyo clients, about profit margins and market shares, things that had seemed so critically important this morning, now felt hollow and meaningless. He'd been minutes away from never reading another text message, never making another deal, never seeing another sunrise. A tow truck pulled into the parking lot 25 minutes later, its amber lights flashing. The driver approached Marcus's window, and Marcus rolled it down. "You the Mercedes with the brake failure?" the driver asked, a middle-aged man with kind eyes. "Yes. Elena Rodriguez from Riverside Auto Repair sent you." "That's right. She called it in. As a priority. Said to treat this like a critical safety tow." He looked at the Mercedes with a professional eye. "You're lucky you got off the highway when you did. Brake line failure is no joke." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "I know that now." As the driver worked to load the Mercedes onto his flatbed, Marcus stood in the parking lot and watched. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, he realized. When had he last stopped to notice a sunset? His phone buzzed with more messages, more demands on his time and attention. But for once, Marcus ignored them. He climbed into the tow truck's passenger seat and gave the driver the address for Riverside Auto Repair. "Taking it back where it started, huh?" the driver commented as he programmed the GPS. "Yeah," Marcus said, looking at the Mercedes secured on the flatbed behind them. "Back where it started. But hopefully, I'm going somewhere different." The driver gave him a curious look but didn't press for explanation. As they pulled out onto the street, heading back toward the repair shop, Marcus thought about what he would say to Eleanor when he saw her again. An apology didn't seem like enough. Not after he'd been so thoroughly wrong, not after she'd saved his life despite his contempt. But it was a start. And maybe, just maybe, this near disaster could be the start of something else too. A wake-up call, a chance to become someone better than the man who had walked into that repair shop a few hours ago, thinking he was better than everyone around him. Marcus's alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., as it did every weekday. But unlike every other morning, he didn't immediately reach for his phone to check overnight emails from the Asian markets. Instead, he lay still for a moment, thinking about the previous day, about how close he'd come to never waking up in this bed again. He got up, made coffee, and stood by his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching. The sunrise paint the Willamette River in shades of gold and pink. How many sunrises had he missed in his rush to get to the office, to check stock prices, to stay ahead in the relentless competition of high finance? His phone buzzed with a text message. "Elena. Morning. Parts for your Mercedes arrived early. Starting work on it now. Should be done by 3-4 p.m. instead of evening. We'll keep you posted on progress." Marcus typed back, "Thank you. No rush. Do it right, not fast." He showered, dressed, in one of his usual designer suits, and headed to the office. But something felt different. As he walked through the lobby of his building, he noticed things he'd never paid attention to before. The security guard who greeted him by name. How long had Marcus been walking past him without really seeing him? The janitor emptying trash cans. When was the last time Marcus had acknowledged his presence? "Good morning, James," Marcus said to the security guard, reading his name tag. James looked. Surprised, then pleased. "Good morning, Mr. Wellington. Beautiful day out there." "It really is," Marcus agreed and meant it. The office was already bustling when Marcus arrived. His assistant Derek looked up from his desk with an expression of concern. "Marcus, thank God. I heard about your car trouble yesterday. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Derek. Thank you for asking." Marcus paused at Derek's desk instead of rushing past toward his office. "Actually, I wanted to thank you for finding that repair shop yesterday. I know I complained about it at the time, but the mechanic there probably saved my life." Derek's eyes widened. "Seriously? What happened?" Marcus gave him an abbreviated version of the story. The failed brake line, the highway crisis. Elena's guidance. He left out the parts about his own arrogance and rudeness, but Derek was sharp enough to read between the lines. "Wow," Derek said when Marcus finished. "That's terrifying. But I'm glad you're okay. And that the mechanic was so helpful despite, he trailed off diplomatically. Despite me being a complete ass to her?" Marcus finished. "Yeah, me too." The morning proceeded with its usual parade of meetings and conference calls. But Marcus found his attention wandering in ways it normally didn't. During a presentation about a potential acquisition, he caught himself thinking about Eleanor working on his car, the concentration and skill required to replace a brake line properly, to ensure every connection was perfect, every potential point of failure addressed. Her work was life or death, he realized. If she made a mistake, people could die. How often did his work carry that kind of weight? He moved money around, made deals, generated profits for investors. Important work, certainly, but was it meaningful in the same way? At lunch, instead of eating at his desk while reviewing reports, Marcus went to the company cafeteria. He sat with some junior analysts, young people hungry and ambitious like he'd once been. He asked them about their lives, their goals, their challenges, and he actually listened to their answers. One young woman, Sarah, mentioned she'd been having car trouble and was worried about affording repairs on her entry-level salary. "It's probably nothing," she said, trying to sound casual, "but the brakes have been squeaking for a while now, and yesterday they felt kind of soft." Marcus felt a chill run through him. "Sarah, don't ignore that. Please. Brake issues can be serious. In fact," he pulled out his phone and found Eleanor's contact information. "Here's a mechanic I trust. Tell her Marcus Wellington referred you. She's honest, skilled, and she won't overcharge you." Sarah looked surprised but grateful. "Thank you, Mr. Wellington. I'll call her this afternoon. And Sarah, if the repair costs more than you budgeted for, come see me. We'll work something out. Your safety is worth more than any amount of money." The afternoon crawled by. Marcus found himself checking his phone repeatedly for updates from Elena. At 2:45 p.m. she texted, "Work complete. Replaced brake line, installed new brake pads all around. Fixed power steering leak. Replaced worn suspension bushings. Took it for a test drive. Everything functioning perfectly. Ready for pickup whenever you're free." Marcus looked at his calendar. He had a meeting scheduled for 3:00 p.m., then another at 4:30. Important meetings, with significant deals on the line. The old Marcus would have stayed until 7 or 8 p.m., squeezing in every last minute of productivity. But the new Marcus, or maybe the Marcus he was trying to become, looked at those meetings differently. Were they genuinely urgent? Would the deals fall apart if he rescheduled? Or was he just addicted to the feeling of being indispensable, of being constantly busy and important? He made 2 phone calls, rescheduling both meetings for the following day. Then he grabbed his jacket and headed out, ignoring Derek's surprised expression. The Uber ride to Riverside Auto Repair took 30 minutes through afternoon traffic. Marcus used the time to think about what he wanted to say to Eleanor. An apology and a thank you didn't seem like enough, but he wasn't sure what else he could offer. The repair shop looked different in the afternoon light, less shabby, more authentic. Marcus could see it now through different eyes. A small business that someone had built with their own hands and dedication. A place where honest work happened, where someone took pride in their craftsmanship. He pushed through the door, and the bell jingled. Elena was at the counter filling out paperwork. She looked up and smiled. A genuine smile this time, warmer than yesterday. "Right on time," she said. "Let me grab your keys and the final invoice." Marcus approached the counter. "How did it go?" "Perfectly. The brake line replacement was straightforward. No complications. I also serviced the brake fluid system since we had it open, and I rotated your tires while I was at it. No additional charge for those. Just made sense to do it while the car was here." She handed him an invoice. Marcus looked at the total, $2,240. Exactly what she'd quoted, not a penny more. He thought about the dealership he usually used, where estimates seemed to grow by hundreds of dollars once the work actually started. "I gave you a discount on the labor," Elena said, pointing to a line item. "You're a referral customer now. Derek called this morning and booked an appointment for his car next week. Referrals get 10% off. Elena, you don't need to give me a discount, especially after everything." "It's shop policy," she interrupted with a slight smile. "Every customer gets the same treatment. That's one of the things my dad taught me. No special deals based on who someone is, but fair prices and honest work for everyone." Marcus pulled out his credit card, but before handing it over he asked, "Can I see the car? And maybe, would you walk me through what you did? I want to understand." Elena's eyebrows raised slightly in surprise, but she nodded. "Sure. Come on back." She led him to Bay 3, where his Mercedes sat gleaming. She'd not only repaired it, but had washed it as well. The silver paint shone. The wheels were spotless. "You washed it," Marcus observed. "We wash every car we work on," Elena said. "Takes 5 minutes, makes customers happy. Now let me show you what we did." For the next 20 minutes, Elena walked Marcus through every repair she'd made. She showed him the new brake line, explained how she'd carefully routed it to avoid future corrosion, demonstrated the proper brake fluid level. She showed him the new brake pads, the replaced suspension bushings, the repaired power steering system. Marcus listened intently, asking questions, genuinely trying to understand. Elena was a natural teacher, patient, clear, able to explain complex mechanical concepts in ways that made sense. "The most important thing to understand," Elena said as they finished the tour, "is that maintenance isn't just about keeping your car running. It's about keeping you safe and keeping everyone else on the road safe too. When you drive a car with failing brakes or worn steering components, you're not just risking your own life, you're risking the lives of everyone around you." "I never thought about it that way," Marcus admitted. "I always just thought about my car as mine, my property, my problem if something went wrong." "That's how a lot of people think," Elena said. "But the reality is, we're all connected on the road. Your mechanical failure can become someone else's tragedy. That's why I take this work so seriously. Every car I repair, I'm thinking about the families in the cars around them, the people walking across intersections, everyone who might be affected if something goes wrong." They walked back to the waiting area, and Marcus handed over his credit card. While Elena processed the payment, he noticed a framed photograph on the wall behind the counter, a younger Elena, standing next to an older man with kind eyes and grease-stained hands, both of them smiling in front of a partially disassembled engine. "That's your father?" Marcus asked. Elena glanced at the photo, and her expression softened. "Yeah, that was taken about 6 months before he died. We were rebuilding a 1967 Mustang engine together, his dream project. He never got to see it finished, but I completed it after he passed. That car is parked in my garage at home. I take it out on his birthday every year. He'd be proud of you," Marcus said quietly. "Of this shop, of your expertise, of the person you are." "I hope so," Elena said, handing him his receipt and keys. "He always said that success wasn't about how much money you made or how important your title was. It was about whether you could look at yourself in the mirror and respect the person looking back." Marcus felt the weight of those words. That's wise. And challenging." "It is," Elena agreed, "but it's also freeing in a way. You don't have to compete with everyone else's definition of success. You just have to live up to your own standards of integrity." Marcus pocketed his keys, but didn't move toward the door. "Elena, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about remembering how this felt, about not judging people based on superficial things, and I want you to know I'm going to try, really try, not just with lip service, but with actual changes in how I think and act." "I appreciate that," Elena said, "but Marcus, don't do it for me. Do it for yourself. Do it because you want to be someone you respect. That's exactly why I'm doing it." Marcus said. He hesitated, then added, I know this might sound strange, but would you be willing to get coffee sometime? Not as customer and mechanic, but just as people. I'd like to hear more about your father, about how you built this business, about your perspective on things. I feel like I have a lot to learn, and you seem like someone who could teach me important lessons. Eleanor studied him for a moment, as if trying to determine whether he was sincere. Sure, she said finally. I usually grab coffee at the place across the street before opening the shop. If you want to stop by some morning around 7, we could talk. I'll be here Saturday morning, Marcus said immediately. 7 o'clock. It's a date, Eleanor said, then quickly added, I mean, an appointment. A coffee appointment. Marcus smiled, genuinely smiled, not his usual polished business smile. I know what you meant. Thank you, Elena, for everything. For the repairs, for the second chance, for treating me better than I treated you. Like I said, everyone deserves safety, and everyone deserves the opportunity to become better than they were. She walked him to the door. Drive carefully, Marcus. Pay attention to how the car feels, how the brakes respond. If anything seems off, then call me immediately. I will. I promise. Marcus walked to his Mercedes, now thoroughly repaired and spotlessly clean. He started the engine and immediately noticed the difference. The transmission mounted properly, no grinding noise. He pressed the brake pedal experimentally, and it was firm, responsive, exactly as it should be. As he drove away from Riverside Auto Repair, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Hope that he could change, that he could become someone better, that it wasn't too late to remember the values his parents had tried to instill in him before success and status had corrupted his perspective. The drive back to his condo took him through some of Portland's less affluent neighborhoods, areas he usually avoided or drove through without really seeing. But today he looked. He saw the small businesses struggling to survive, the families working multiple jobs, the people doing honest work for honest pay. People like his parents had been. People like Elena. That evening, Marcus didn't open his laptop to catch up on work. Instead, he called his mother in Florida, where she and his father had retired 5 years ago. Marcus, is everything all right? His mother's voice was immediately concerned. He so rarely called outside of holidays. Everything's fine, Mom. I wanted to talk to you and to hear Dad's voice. Is he there? Of course, honey, hold on. A moment later, his father's gruff voice came on the line. Marcus, your mother said, you wanted to talk. What's wrong? You need money? Marcus laughed, a real laugh. His father had never lost his working-class sensibility, even after Marcus had achieved financial success. No, Dad, I don't need money. I just wanted to tell you both something. I had a wake-up call yesterday, something that made me realize I'd lost sight of the values you tried to teach me. He told them the story, all of it, including the parts that made him look bad. His dismissive treatment of Elena, his arrogance, his assumption that his wealth and status made him superior to people who worked with their hands. His parents listened without interrupting. When he finished, there was a long silence. Then his father said, Son, I'm not going to lie. Hearing how you treated that mechanic made me ashamed. That's not how we raised you. I know, Dad. I know it's not. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I became someone you wouldn't recognize, someone who forgot where he came from. But, his father continued, his voice softer now, I'm proud of you for recognizing it, for admitting it. A lot of people never do. They just keep going, never questioning, never changing. The fact that you called us to tell us this, that means something. His mother's voice came through, thick with emotion. Marcus, honey, success is wonderful. We're so proud of everything you've accomplished. But never forget, your worth isn't measured by your bank account or your job title. It's measured by how you treat people, especially people who can't do anything for you in return. I won't forget again, Mom, I promise. They talked for another hour, really talked, the way they hadn't in years. Marcus told them about Elena's father, about the lessons of integrity and excellence, about the coffee meeting planned for Saturday. His parents told him stories about the old neighborhood, about their own struggles and triumphs, about the values they'd tried to pass down to him. When Marcus finally hung up, he felt lighter, somehow, as if by admitting his failures to the people who mattered most, he'd created space for actual change. Saturday morning arrived cool and clear. Marcus woke at 6 a.m., not because an alarm went off, but because he was genuinely looking forward to the day. He dressed casually, jeans and a simple button-down shirt instead of one of his suits. No Rolex today, just a simple watch his father had given him when he graduated college. He arrived at the coffee shop across from Riverside Auto, repair at 6:55 a.m. Through the window, he could see Elena already there, sitting at a corner table with a laptop open, wearing jeans and a Portland Trail Blazers t-shirt. She looked up as he entered and waved him over. "You're early," she observed. "I'm impressed. When something's important, I try not to be late," Marcus said, then added with a slight smile, "Not anymore anyway." They ordered coffee. Marcus got a simple drip coffee instead of his usual complicated espresso drink, and settled into conversation. Marcus asked Elena about her business, and she opened up about the challenges of running a small repair shop in an industry dominated by large chains and dealerships. "The hardest part isn't the work," Elena explained. "I love the work. It's everything else. Insurance, regulations, competing with shops that cut corners to offer lower prices, dealing with customers who've been burned by dishonest mechanics and assume I'm the same. How do you handle the competition?" Marcus asked, genuinely interested. "By being undeniably good at what I do. By treating every customer fairly, whether they're driving a Mercedes or a 20-year-old Honda. By doing work I can be proud of." She took a sip of her coffee. "It's not always the most profitable approach. I probably could make more money if I pushed unnecessary services or used cheaper parts, but I wouldn't be able to sleep at night." Marcus thought about his own business practices, about deals he'd made that were technically legal, but ethically questionable. "Do you ever feel like you're at a disadvantage? Like the people without your ethical standards are getting ahead while you're struggling?" "Sometimes," Elena admitted. "But then I remember what my dad used to say. The person who wins by cheating hasn't really won. They've just postponed their loss. Eventually, dishonesty catches up with you. Meanwhile, building a reputation for integrity creates something sustainable, something real." They talked. For 2 hours, their coffee cups long empty. Elena told stories about her father, about learning mechanics, about the challenges and satisfactions of her work. Marcus found himself opening up in ways he rarely did, talking about his parents, about the pressure he'd felt to succeed, about how success had gradually changed him in ways he hadn't noticed until it was almost too late. "Can I ask you something personal?" Elena said finally. "Of course. What made you become an investment banker? What drew you to that work originally?" Marcus had to think about that. "Honestly, at first it was about escaping poverty, about making sure I'd never struggle the way my parents did. But then," he paused, searching for honesty, "then it became about proving something, proving I was smart enough, successful enough, important enough. It became about the status and the competition more than anything else. And now, after this week, after everything that happened, what do you want it to be about?" Marcus met her eyes. "I don't know yet, but I know it needs to mean something more than just accumulating wealth and status. I need to figure out how to use what I've achieved to actually make things better, not just for myself, but for others." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "That's a good starting point. My dad used to say that every person has gifts, things they're naturally good at or skills they've developed. The question is whether you use your gifts only for yourself or whether you use them to lift others up too." "What are your gifts?" Marcus asked. "I'm good with my hands, good at solving mechanical problems, good at teaching." So I try to use those gifts to keep people safe, to help them understand their vehicles, to train young mechanics who are just starting out." She gestured around them. "That's why I started offering free car maintenance workshops once a month, teaching basic skills like checking fluid levels, changing tires, recognizing warning signs, especially aimed at people who might otherwise get taken advantage of because they don't know anything about cars." Marcus felt a spark of inspiration. "That's brilliant. Have you thought about expanding that? Maybe partnering with community organizations, high schools, groups that work with low-income families?" Elena's eyes lit up. "I'd love to, but the challenge is time and resources. Running the shop keeps me busy enough. It's hard to find time for expansion. What if you had help? What if someone volunteered to handle the organizational side, finding venues, coordinating with community groups, managing the logistics, while you focused on the teaching part? That would be amazing, but who would—" Elena trailed off, looking at Marcus. "Are you offering?" "I am," Marcus said. "Look, I'm good at organizing things, at managing projects, at coordinating multiple stakeholders. Those are my gifts, as you put it. What if I use them to help expand your workshop program? No payment needed, just a chance to do something meaningful." Elena studied him for a long moment. "You're serious, aren't you?" "Completely serious. I've been thinking all week about what I could do differently, how I could use my position and skills for something that actually matters. This feels right." A slow smile spread across Elena's face. "Okay, let's do it. But on one condition. You can't just organize. You have to participate. Get your hands dirty, learn some basic mechanics, help with the teaching. Deal?" Marcus grinned. "Deal." They spent the next hour planning. Elena's laptop opened between them as they brainstormed ideas. They could start with one workshop a month in the evenings, aimed at people who work during the day. Marcus would reach out to community centers about hosting space. Elena would develop curriculum covering essential car maintenance skills. They could recruit other mechanics to help with instruction. By the time they left the coffee shop, the sun was high in the sky and the day was warming up. Marcus felt energized in a way he couldn't remember feeling in years, excited about a project that had nothing to do with profit margins or corporate acquisitions. "Thank you," he said to Elena, as they stood outside the shop. "For coffee, for the conversation, for giving me a chance to be part of something meaningful." "Thank you for being willing to learn and change," Elena replied. "A lot of people never do. They have their moment of realization and then gradually slide back into old patterns. The fact that you're here, that you're actively looking for ways to be different, that takes real courage." Marcus shook his head. "It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like survival. I realized this week that the person I'd become wasn't someone I wanted to be. If I hadn't changed, I would have kept being that person, arrogant, dismissive, disconnected from what really matters. That's a kind of death, even if you're still breathing." "Well, consider yourself resurrected then," Elena said with a smile. "Now go enjoy your Saturday, and Marcus, drive safe. Those new brakes are solid, but they can't help if you're not paying attention." "I'll pay attention," Marcus promised, "to the driving and to everything else." He drove home slowly, deliberately, noticing things. A family at a crosswalk, the father holding his young daughter's hand. An elderly couple walking their dog in the morning sun. A food cart vendor setting up for the lunch rush, carefully arranging his workspace. All these lives, all these people with their own struggles and triumphs, their own expertise and dignity. He'd been moving through the world for years without really seeing them, thinking he was above them, separate from them. But this week had taught him a profound truth. We're all connected. We all depend on each other in ways we don't often recognize. The mechanic who keeps your brakes working, the janitor who keeps your building clean, the security guard who keeps you safe, the barista who makes your coffee. None of these jobs are beneath anyone. They're all essential threads in the fabric of society. Over the following months, Marcus's life began to change in ways both large and small. The community maintenance workshops, which he and Elena launched together, grew from one session a month to two, then four. They partnered with local high schools to teach basic automotive skills to teenagers. They worked with women's shelters to help residents learn how to maintain their vehicles and avoid being taken advantage of by unscrupulous mechanics. Marcus still worked at his investment firm, but he changed how he worked. He started mentoring junior employees the way he wished someone had mentored him, not just teaching them financial strategies, but also ethical decision-making and the importance of integrity. He used his position to advocate for community investment initiatives, for projects that supported small businesses and local entrepreneurs. He stayed in touch with Elena, their friendship deepening over shared coffee conversations and workshop planning sessions. She taught him about cars, not just the mechanics, but the philosophy behind good craftsmanship. He helped her business grow through word-of-mouth referrals and honest reviews, never leveraging his connections for special treatment, but simply ensuring that good work got recognized. 1 year after the day Eleanor had saved his life, Marcus stood in front of a group of 30 people, teenagers, single parents, elderly folks on fixed incomes, in a community center gymnasium. Elena stood beside him along with 3 other mechanics she'd recruited. They were about to start teaching basic automotive maintenance, empowering people with knowledge that could save them money and keep them safe. As Marcus looked out at the faces in front of him, people who looked like his parents had looked when he was young, people who were struggling but determined, people who deserved respect and dignity regardless of their economic status. He felt something he hadn't felt in his years of corporate success, genuine pride. This was meaningful work. This mattered. Elena stepped forward to begin the workshop, and Marcus watched her in action. Confident, knowledgeable, patient with questions, able to explain complex concepts in accessible ways. This was who she had been all along, from the very first moment he'd walked into her shop and dismissed her based on his shallow assumptions. He thought about that version of himself, the man who had humiliated a skilled professional because of his own arrogance. That man seemed like a stranger now, someone from a different lifetime. The brake line failure had nearly killed him, but in a strange way, it had also saved him. Saved him from continuing to be someone empty and superficial. Saved him from a life of material success, but spiritual poverty. Saved him from losing touch with the values that actually mattered. As Elena finished her introduction and invited participants to gather around the vehicle they'd be working on, she caught Marcus's eye and smiled, a smile of partnership, of mutual respect, of shared purpose. Marcus smiled back and moved to help set up the next demonstration. His hands would get dirty today. He'd learn something new. He'd help others learn. And at the end of it all, when he looked in the mirror, he'd see someone he respected. That, he had learned, was worth more than all the luxury cars and corner offices in the world.